today, but what about the company's image going forward? For more, we're joined once again by the Wall Street Journal's Stephen Power and Taylor Griffin of Hamilton Place Strategies, a public affairs and strategic consulting firm here in Washington. Now, this is not the first big company to get into trouble, Taylor, but I mean, you look at, I don't know, say Anderson Consulting after the whole Enron, they became Accenture. Does BP stay as BP?
I think BP probably does. I think BP probably survives, but this is unprecedented. There's been nothing like this that has really ever happened. The American public has been captivated by this issue, and the world really, for several months. But ultimately, people are not going to forget if they change their name from BP to something else, what this company was. There's probably no point in doing that. In the case of Accenture and Anderson Consulting, this was a business-to-business thing where it wasn't a big consumer awareness of the brand. But BP's probably going to have to keep the brand the same. The important thing is going to be building that trust back going forward.
And does that start today with the changing of, announcing that Hayward is going and Bob Dudley's coming in?
Absolutely. It's a fair criticism of BP that they didn't recognize in the beginning the severity of this crisis and react appropriately. There was a disconnect between what the public was seeing as a very severe crisis and the way that BP responded to it initially. They tried to minimize the potential impact, etc. I think now by making this change, I think it's very clear that they've recognized in a very visible way, and it's a good way, that there's a big problem here.
Stephen, it was always going to be a disaster, come what may, when you've got an explosion like this and there is oil spewing into the Gulf. Was it made worse by the company's communication strategy and just the kind of way, that rather clumsy, clunking way that they seem to communicate with the outside world and the Gulf residents?
I think one tangible example of what you're describing is this, the fact that they were so reluctant for so long to give a precise figure of how big the spill estimate could be. They started out by saying, oh, only 1,000 barrels a day. Well, over a period of weeks and very grudgingly, and only after the members of Congress dug into the issue and U.S. agencies started probing the issue, did they admit reluctantly that, yes, it was actually much more than that, in the tens of millions of barrels a day. And so I think that was one example of where they really stumbled when they were trying to communicate publicly.
I mean, it did seem at stages, though, that BP as a company, this huge, powerful company, the U.S. administration had its boot on their windpipe almost.
I think that's absolutely right. I think that actually hurt the administration in some ways. The revelation that the president had not met with the CEO of BP up until very late into the crisis was something that I think people were shocked by. They wanted to see the government working very closely with BP to fix this problem. And the government was worried about getting the negative PR on BP onto the White House, and so we're reluctant to do that. I think that ultimately that didn't pay off for them because people just want it fixed. That's the bottom line.
Taylor, if they were to come to you and say, what do we need to do? How do we rebuild this image? How do we go forward? What would your advice be?
Well, not looking back at the things you would have done in the beginning, which there are a lot of things you might have done better. I think a lot of what they're doing right now is good. Look, whoever was CEO of BP, given the severity of this crisis, probably would have had to step down. So regardless of what you think about Tony Hayward, whether or not he did a good job, certainly had some gaffes in public, that had to happen. They've done that now. That's the right thing to do. The next step is that they really have to start re-engaging with people and rebuilding confidence and trust. What he just mentioned about the failure to recognize the level of the spill initially and trying to downplay that, they can't do that going forward. They have to be very honest with people.
And Stephen Power, very briefly, I wonder whether there are things Barack Obama would have done differently in the way that he's handled this, because he was terrified that this would turn into his Hurricane Katrina.
Right. I think the problem for President Obama was that many of the policies and procedures that he had to use once the accident happened were locked in place by law. His government did not have a very good fix on how to deal with a major oil spill, and it didn't help matters that only 3 weeks or so before this accident, he personally proposed to greatly expand offshore drilling. And so once the accident happened, it was very difficult for him then to claim that his administration had been on the lookout for safety-related problems.
Okay, Stephen Power and Taylor Griffin of Hamilton Place Strategies, both of you, thanks so much for taking part in this BBC special with us. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, tomorrow it will be 100 days since that explosion on the